The noise started at 8:17 a.m. The sound of metal chains, diesel rumble, and a white Mercedes being hoisted off the ground, while half the neighborhood watched. That same woman, Bethany Kruger, had spent months treating our HOA like her personal kingdom. And that morning, her crown finally slipped. 3 hours earlier, she'd taken a crowbar to my brand new Camaro. Not a random act, not a mistake. Deliberate destruction caught on camera. The crunch of glass, the scratch of metal, $40,000 worth of freedom turned into a glittering heap on my driveway. But what she didn't know was that every second of her power trip had been recorded, traced, and filed. Bank records, forged invoices, shell companies buried in HOA ledgers. While she was busy breaking my car, I was busy uncovering everything. In exactly 12 minutes, she would be standing in that same driveway, her Mercedes hooked, her reputation gone, and a police cruiser waiting at the curb. What would you do if someone like that, an HOA president drunk on control, tried to ruin you? Would you fight back or move away like everyone else? I didn't move. I documented. And that decision changed Willowbrook Estates forever. My name is Darius Miller, 52, an electrician who bought a modest ranch home in Willowbrook Estates after a difficult divorce. I spent what remained of my settlement on a red 2024 Camaro SS, my first real taste of something that felt like mine again. The neighborhood looked quiet on paper, identical lawns, neat sidewalks, and an HOA that kept everything tidy. I learned fast that tidy was another word for control. 3 days after I moved in, a citation appeared from my black mailbox. It violated the community color standard. The next Tuesday, an envelope accused my grass of being 3/4 of an inch too tall. An oil stain on the driveway brought another fine. A garden hose left unwound earned a reprimand. Each notice landed with the same precision, always on Tuesday mornings, always signed by Bethany Kruger. Bethany had been HOA president for 6 years. Her house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac with perfect hedges and a white Mercedes on display. At the first board meeting, she called my Camaro inappropriate for our community standards. She spoke with the calm authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. 4 board members nodded. The vote was 4-1 in favor of upholding the fines. I read the covenants that night line by line and found that many of the rules she cited were not in our bylaws. When I returned to the meeting with my notes, she smiled politely and suggested I might be happier elsewhere. That dismissal said more than the fines ever could. This was enforcement wielded as social power, not governance. Willowbrook Estates presented itself as community. In practice, it enforced conformity through selective application of authority. I refused to quietly comply. 4 days after that board meeting, I walked outside and stopped cold. My Camaro, my one reminder that life could still feel like mine, was shredded. Long, deep gouges ran across the driver's side, each one deliberate, carved through the paint to the metal. The morning light caught every scratch like a mirror, reflecting anger back at me. I called the police. Officer Martinez arrived with the tired calm of someone who'd handled too many petty disputes. He took pictures, wrote a short report, and said the words no victim wants to hear. Probably kids. But nothing about those cuts looked random. They were precise, measured, calculated. The repair estimate hit $2,800, money I didn't have. Insurance wouldn't touch it. That night I sat in silence, staring at that car through the window, knowing whoever did this wanted me rattled. Then came the text from Martha Hensley, my 73-year-old neighbor. "Can you come over, honey? I need to tell you something." Her living room smelled like lavender and worry. Curtains drawn, voice shaking, she whispered, "It was Bethany's son, Trevor. I saw him near your driveway, around midnight." I asked if she'd tell police. She shook her head, terrified. "I can't. She'll make my life hell." Then she told me about Mrs. Peterson, cited for bird feeders after questioning HOA budgets, her house for sale 2 weeks later. That's when the pattern clicked. This wasn't about lawns or cars. It was control, fear disguised as enforcement. Bethany thought she'd scared me into silence, but she'd only convinced me to start recording. After that night, something inside me flipped. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was focused. Every time Bethany tried to push me into a corner, she used paperwork and fear. So I decided to fight back with something stronger. Proof. I spent the weekend wiring my property like a project site, motion-activated dash cams, night vision lenses, cloud-backed recordings with time-stamped data, every wire buried clean, every angle calculated. My electrical work had always been about precision, and now that skill became my armor. These weren't just cameras. They were insurance policies against lies. By Monday, they were live. I could see every inch of my driveway, my fence, my garage, every blind spot gone. Then right on cue, trouble showed up wearing a city badge. Brad Kruger, code enforcement officer. Same last name. Turns out he's Bethany's cousin. Clipboard in hand, fake smile ready. He told me there'd been a complaint about unauthorized surveillance. I showed him the camera angles, the property lines, and the law itself. Nothing faced another window. Every inch legal. He couldn't find a violation but promised to keep an eye on things. We both knew what that meant. That night, Martha called again. 3 more families, the Hendersons, Washingtons, and Garcias, all gone after sudden floods of citations and anonymous code reports. Same story. Different names, that's when it all connected. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography, intimidation designed to look like order. But now I had something Bethany never expected. Visibility. She could file her papers in the dark all she wanted. I was done playing blind. 3 nights later, at exactly 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. A motion alert. Half asleep, I opened the camera feed, expecting maybe a stray cat. Instead, my heart stopped. There she was, Bethany Kruger, HOA president, crouched beside my Camaro with a landscaping edger in her hands, the kind we keep in the community shed. She wasn't sneaking, she was working, like it was part of her morning routine. Slow, deliberate strokes carving fresh wounds into my car's rear panel. The metal screamed with each cut. Even through the night vision, I could see the glint of her wedding ring and that perfect blonde bob. For a full minute, I just stared. Every instinct told me to storm outside, but my lawyer's voice echoed in my head. Don't react, document. So I let the footage roll while she destroyed thousands of dollars in paint, unaware she was filming her own felony. By sunrise, I was ready to take it to the police, but before I could, the HOA delivered a letter to my mailbox, stamped emergency violation notice. According to Bethany, my Camaro now had unauthorized modifications and violated Section 4.7b. It had to be removed from my property within 48 hours, or face towing and additional fees. The timing was almost poetic. Hours after vandalizing my car, she was already framing me as the violator. Standing there holding that letter, I realized this wasn't random cruelty anymore. It was strategy. She was escalating from fines to force, but this time she wasn't the only one with evidence. The next big break didn't come from a courtroom or a cop. It came from Martha again. She called one evening, whispering like we were in a spy movie. "There's someone you need to meet," she said. He used to be on the board, a treasurer. That's how I met Edgar Williams. We met at a dimly lit coffee shop 30 minutes outside Willowbrook, the kind of place where conversations stay buried under old jazz music. Edgar looked exhausted, a man who'd carried a secret too long. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, invoices, and company records. Each page told a story, of checks written to businesses that didn't exist, of maintenance jobs billed but never done. "The numbers don't lie," Edgar said quietly. "She's been stealing from the HOA for years." The smoking gun was a registration form for Willowbrook Maintenance Solutions, a company filed under Bethany's maiden name, Bethany Morrison, with her home address listed as headquarters. Every landscaping payment, $500 here, $2,000 there, was funneled straight into her personal account. Edgar's voice cracked when he told me how it ended. He'd questioned her once, and within a week he was buried under fake violation letters about roof safety hazards. His insurance got canceled and he finally moved away. Before leaving, he leaned in and said, "I kept everything. The invoices, the ledgers, all of it. I just needed someone who wouldn't back down." That night, driving home with that folder on my passenger seat, I realized this wasn't about power anymore. It was about money, fraud, and silence. And silence was no longer an option. Edgar's folder opened the door, but what came next blew it wide open. A week later, I got a knock on my door. It was James Crawford, one of the neighbors Bethany had fined for improper vehicle storage. He looked serious. "You need to talk to my brother Rico," he said. "He runs the towing company that contracts with the HOA. When Rico showed up the next morning, he didn't come empty-handed. He brought a stack of invoices, 18 months' worth, each one signed by Bethany Kruger herself. The total? $3,800. Every job was legitimate, every vehicle removal authorized, but Rico had never been paid. Here's where it got ugly. The HOA's bank statements showed identical payments, same amounts, same dates. But the checks went to Crawford Towing Solutions, not Rico's company. A different entity entirely. The registration records listed Rebecca Morrison as the owner, Bethany's sister. That's when the pattern sharpened. First the shell company, Willowbrook Maintenance Solutions. Now another, Crawford Towing Solutions. Every time money left the HOA account, it found its way back to the same family. Rico slammed a folder onto my table. "She's been using my company's name to steal," he said. "Even forged my invoices." When I compared Rico's records with Edgar's financial files, the total theft topped $75,000. Landscaping, towing, fake security services, all fabricated, all funneled through her network. For years, Bethany had built an empire out of fake paperwork and intimidation. But now we had receipts, witnesses, and names, and for the first time, it wasn't just whispers. It was evidence strong enough to burn through her entire facade. Once the full scope of Bethany's fraud came to light, silence in the neighborhood finally broke. Martha Hensley became the messenger, knocking on doors, calling old friends, and carefully explaining what we'd found. Within days, 15 residents came forward, each carrying their own story of harassment, false citations, or financial pressure. We gathered one evening in my garage, now a makeshift war room lined with documents, invoices, and photographs. Edgar Williams returned, carrying the original ledgers and canceled checks he'd saved for years. His hands trembled when he spoke, but his eyes had something they hadn't in a long time: conviction. That's when Sarah Kim entered the picture, a Dallas attorney with a reputation for dismantling corrupt HOA boards. Calm, sharp, and methodical, she flipped through our folders like someone assembling a federal case. After half an hour, she looked up and said, "This isn't civil anymore. This is federal jurisdiction. Mail fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement." Sarah laid out the plan: duplicate every document, timestamp every file, and back it up across multiple devices. Texas law allowed single-party consent recordings, so we wired additional mics near meetings and phone calls. Rico brought in surveillance-grade equipment, motion sensors, directional audio, even a drone for aerial footage. Sarah also contacted Channel 8's Lisa Martinez, the investigative reporter known for exposing HOA corruption. If authorities hesitated, the public would see everything. By the end of that week, we weren't just angry neighbors anymore. We were an organized resistance, went with lawyers, witnesses, evidence, and a plan. Bethany's empire had ruled through fear. Ours was about to run on facts. The morning of the confrontation felt different. Quiet, heavy, like the calm before a thunderstorm. At 7 a.m. sharp, Rico Crawford's tow truck rolled into Willowbrook Estates, engine rumbling low as diesel smoke curled into the cool air. He parked legally on the public street right in front of Bethany Kruger's house. Inside that cab sat 18 months of unpaid invoices, each one stamped with her signature. Within minutes, Bethany stormed out of her front door, silk robe swaying like armor. "You need to move this truck," she snapped. "This is private property." Rico didn't flinch. He handed her the folder. "Not until I get paid. $3,800, all authorized by you." She froze when she saw the documents. The same invoices already duplicated in Sarah Kim's files. That's when her phone came out. Within 10 minutes, Officer Rodriguez arrived, the same one who'd handled my vandalism report. Bethany launched into her performance. "This man is harassing me, blocking access, threatening me." But this time she wasn't the only one holding paperwork. Martha Edgar and James Crawford walked up carrying binders full of bank statements, HOA correspondence, and recorded minutes. Two board members, Jennifer Walsh and Tom Rodriguez, joined them, visibly shaken. Both admitted they'd never seen those towing invoices before. And then the timing hit perfectly. The Channel 8 news van pulled up. Reporter Lisa Martinez stepped out, cameras rolling. Bethany thought she'd control the story. Instead, she was the headline, surrounded by witnesses, neighbors, and her own signatures. That morning, the neighborhood finally stopped whispering and started watching. By the time the news cameras finished setting up, the entire street had gathered. Neighbors who'd spent years hiding behind curtains now stood shoulder to shoulder, phones out, filming every second. For once, the fear was on the other side. Bethany's perfect composure cracked. She paced her driveway, shouting into her phone, calling city officials, threatening lawsuits, demanding the mayor intervene. But no one was answering this time. Officer Rodriguez stood calm, surrounded by folders of evidence, the same ones Sarah Kim had organized. Bank statements, vendor records, signatures, even the video of Bethany vandalizing my Camaro. Every document connected her name to the fraud. Then federal investigators arrived. Two unmarked sedans pulling up slow, the kind of quiet that feels louder than sirens. The lead agent spoke briefly with Rodriguez, reviewed the paperwork, and nodded. The look on Bethany's face shifted from rage to panic. That's when Rico stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "your Mercedes is being impounded for unpaid liens, $4,200. The tow hook clamped down on that white car like divine punctuation. As the vehicle lifted, Bethany screamed, the sound echoing down the street like a final alarm. Moments later, the agents moved in. "Bethany Morrison Kruger, you're under arrest for embezzlement, mail fraud, and conspiracy." Handcuffs clicked and the cameras captured it all. Neighbors cheering, kids watching from school buses, the tyrant finally dethroned. After years of fear, justice had a sound, metal cuffs, diesel engines, and the applause of a community finally free. 6 months later, the story that started with one scratched Camaro ended inside a federal courtroom. Bethany Kruger stood before Judge Patricia Williams. The same calm confidence she'd once used to intimidate neighbors now gone. The sentence was short but final. 3 years in federal prison, 5 years probation, and $127,000 in restitution. The numbers told one story. The silence in the room told another. For the first time, the people she'd ruled through fear finally saw real accountability. The restitution funds rebuilt Willowbrook from the ground up. Her house was auctioned, the stolen money recovered, and for once, those same HOA accounts were used to repair what had been neglected: playgrounds, sidewalks, community lighting. Darius's Camaro was restored to perfection through a neighborhood fundraiser that raised double what he needed. The extra money created a legal defense fund, a safeguard against any future HOA abuse. The board was restructured entirely. Edgar Williams became treasurer, enforcing quarterly audits. Martha Hensley turned her notes into a published guide on fighting HOA corruption. Sarah Kim's legal victory inspired statewide reform, known as the Willowbrook Act. mandating transparency and background checks for every HOA board in Texas. By the next year, the laughter of kids replaced the silence of fear. Neighbors waved instead of hiding. Every file, every photo, every sleepless night had meant something. Because when ordinary people refuse to stay quiet, corruption collapses under its own weight. And in Willowbrook Estates, justice wasn't just served, it was built into the foundation of the neighborhood itself. If you believe accountability matters, tap like and help this story. Reach more people. One click helps expose how power really works in our communities. Subscribe for more real HOA cases where truth finally wins.